Yesterday, the algorithm offered me a familiar topic, and I'd like to talk about this a bit since I find it increasingly urgent that we do something about these unsustainable inequalities, extreme poverty, and exploitation. I'm not surprised that more and more people are depressed and want some change. The statistics are staggering. According to recent data, the richest 1% now own nearly half of the world's wealth, while the bottom 50% barely scrape by with less than 2%. In my home country of Hungary, we've seen inflation hit 25% in recent years, while wages have struggled to keep pace. But this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about real people losing their homes, their dignity, and their hope. Mental health issues have skyrocketed globally, with depression rates up 25% since the pandemic began. Is it really any wonder? When you're working multiple jobs just to survive, when you can't afford basic necessities despite working full-time, when you're one medical emergency away from homelessness, of course you're going to feel overwhelmed. 2 years ago, when I lost my contract and was trying to figure out what the hell to do with my life, after all my income sources stopped, and I was trying to find something to replace it with, I came across an interesting concept. UBI. Universal Basic Income. The idea is simple. Everyone gets a minimal amount that can cover their daily living. No means testing, no bureaucratic hoops, no shame, just a guaranteed floor beneath which no one can fall. Of course, I could hardly wait for some progress to happen in this direction. But of course that didn't happen, and I don't think it ever will, at least not in the system we currently live in. And here's why I've become so cynical about UBI as it's currently proposed. Just for some background information. I'm an IT professional, and I founded a company through which I plan to provide IT services to international clients. I don't have a huge team. I'm alone in this company. I designed this company as a possible solution to work together with clients. Since we're not tied to a location in IT and can do our work from anywhere in the world, I thought the whole world was at my feet, especially since basically the same problems need to be solved in almost every company. Helping developers work, establishing stable CI/CD pipeline solutions, setting up reliable IT systems, and monitoring relevant data. But I didn't think that I would end up in a bidding game. That is, I wouldn't be paid based on my added value but on how I could underbid others. Welcome to the gig economy, where having skills and expertise matters less than being willing to work for pennies. Companies, of course, want a solution, and preferably quickly and cheaply, but even better if it's free. I didn't really expect this attitude, and despite applying as a contractor for certain tasks, I would be treated as an employee intended to be a slave. The modern workplace has normalized exploitation in ways we don't even notice anymore. Answer emails at 11 p.m. Sure. Work weekends? Expected. Available 24/7. That's just being professional. Then came my layoff. I didn't get a sensible answer for the reason. The reason I got was that fundamentally there was no need for my work, so they're not surprised that they're firing me now, but that they hired me in the first place. Think about that for a moment. They admitted that hiring me was a mistake, that my work was never actually needed. But I was still there for months collecting a paycheck while someone somewhere decided that my role was redundant. This is the insanity of corporate bureaucracy. This experience exhausted me emotionally, and I don't think I've really recovered yet. I thought I'd take a month and try to recharge. There will be other opportunities, but the other opportunity didn't come. Slowly before my eyes, my accounts started to dwindle. I would have had about 5 years with this income to reach my financial independence level. Instead, I was calculating how many months I have left until I have to sell my house, since I can no longer pay the installments. I had already cut back on food consumption long ago, and my friend and his family's willingness to help helped a lot. In this situation, I first encountered this thought: universal basic income. Not the Sam Altman bullshit, not a virtual currency that I have to sell my soul for, but a general allowance provided by the state that could help me pay for water, electricity, mortgage installments, and maybe even buy bread. At the time, this sounded completely like science fiction. Everyone gets enough to live. This surely can't work. But as I read more about it and watched more videos, I realized that there had already been experiments, but unfortunately they were sabotaged or cut short, like the Finnish experiment, where 2,000 unemployed people received $560 per month from 2017 to 2019. The results were fascinating. Employment levels barely changed. Recipients worked an average of 49.6 days compared to 49.3 days for the control group. Basically no difference. But here's what did change. Mental health improved dramatically. Participants reported lower stress levels, better health perceptions, greater confidence in the future, higher overall happiness, and an increased sense of security. Researchers described recipients as healthier, less stressed, and more confident. But here's the thing. The Finnish government declined to extend or expand the program, citing the lack of employment improvement. They ignored the massive improvements in well-being and mental health. They ignored that people felt more secure and less stressed. Because for the people in power, the only metric that matters is whether you're producing economic value. Your happiness doesn't appear on a spreadsheet. And Finland isn't alone. The Canada Mincome experiment from 1974 to 1979 in Dauphin, Manitoba showed even more promising results. Poverty was virtually eliminated. Hospitalization rates decreased by 8.5%. Mental health complaints decreased. Domestic violence incidents decreased. Children's academic performance improved. School dropout rates decreased. And working hours only decreased slightly. Men hardly changed at all, while women worked slightly less, mainly for childcare and education reasons. No mass exodus from the workforce. No laziness epidemic. But here's what's really interesting. Entrepreneurship and job retraining increased. When people had a basic safety net, they could take risks, they could start businesses, they could retrain for better careers, they could make long-term decisions rather than survival mode choices. The Alaska Permanent Fund dividend has been running since 1982, distributing oil revenue to all permanent residents. Annual payments range from $1,000 to over $3,000 per person. Alaska has become one of the U.S. states with the lowest poverty rates and high economic equality. No significant negative impact on employment. A family of 5 received $16,400 in 2022 alone. Imagine what that could do for a family struggling to make ends meet. Many criticize UBI's economic feasibility. Who will pay this amount? More taxes will have to be levied. And yes, I understand what you're trying to say. If we introduced it now, someone would have to pay for it, and of course no one wants to pay. But for some reason no one thinks that it's actually the people receiving UBI who will pay for this privilege. And here's what I mean by that. I think for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to create something. Help society. When I got my first laptop, I remember creating smaller projects even on the bus and seeking out creative communities. Smaller companies that had some IT problem. At that time I had a big advantage. My parents supported me, and I had time to learn and find people I could help. That's not an accident. That's privilege. And here's what the research shows about privilege and innovation. When people have their basic needs met, they don't stop working, they start creating. The Mincome experiment showed exactly this. With basic security, cognitive resources shifted from emergency response to planning. Poverty actually reduces cognitive ability by 13-14 IQ points, similar to the effect of losing a full night's sleep. When you're worried about survival, you literally cannot think as clearly or creatively. This is a big criticism of UBI. If everyone received it, no one would want to work and thus there would be no economic activity. This is not true. Humans fundamentally want to create and be with others. When we're together with others and able to open up, we'll hear their problems, and we'll instinctively think about possible solutions, which can lead to a business idea. But this is only 10% of humanity. I've heard this excuse too. If you've dealt with starting businesses and startups, it might be familiar to you that 90% of businesses fail. Then why do companies exist at all? Why are there successes? Precisely for this reason, because the 10% brings success. Let's not get hung up on percentages. It's not the success rate that matters, but that according to venture capital you invest in 10 companies so that one company not only recoups your investment but also generates profit. And if you have the time and resources to found 10 companies or pursue 10 ideas to the end, there's a good chance you'll create something successful. But this doesn't work by constantly agonizing over how many months you have left. So UBI could cause a huge economic boom. A study of the Mincome experiment found that when people had basic security, failed experiments became less costly. The safety net enabled risk-taking. That's how innovation happens. And for me, UBI represented light at the end of the tunnel that never came, or rather I would call it that in this form. At the end of the tunnel there's not light, but a train coming. Inflation. Here's where I need to address the elephant in the room, because this is the argument that shut down my support for UBI as it's currently proposed. If everyone had more money, people would want to buy more and the increased demand would drive up prices. This made me think, wait, the point of UBI is to support basic needs, things we need anyway, so we'd buy them anyway. Why would this cause inflation? If today I have to pay my water bill, electricity bill, and buy bread, how does that change from having $1,000 more in my account or not? This is a distribution problem, which basically doesn't exist. If the human population doesn't double overnight, this won't change so quickly and drastically. What will change drastically is our productivity, since we'll have time to work on things that create real value. But then I started looking at what actually happened with agricultural subsidies, and I realized something terrifying. Inflation under UBI won't come from increased demand, it will come from increased exploitation by those who control essential resources. Let me explain what I mean. I'm a bit privileged, my parents work in agriculture. And I grew up in this too, although I was more drawn to electronic gadgets. I wouldn't call farming an easy life. It requires land, and there's never enough land. You need to know what to plant when to harvest, and when it's worth selling. The weather can change anytime, and the harvest can be destroyed from one day to the next, due to weather changes, diseases, or anything. But if we want to make a living from it, we can no longer go to the field with a hoe and cultivate several hectares. We need machines, diesel fuel, and serious logistics and workforce. That's why it's no wonder that farmers worldwide receive subsidies to continue this activity, especially since everyone needs to eat. And here's where it gets interesting. The EU's Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, has a budget of $270.1 billion for 2023-2027, with annual direct payments to farmers averaging $38.8 billion. That's massive. And what has been the result? In the past 60 years, CAP has increased EU agricultural self-sufficiency from 68% to 103%. But here's the problem: food prices haven't gone down for consumers. If I remember correctly, my family has been receiving various subsidies for the past 15-20 years. Fuel subsidy, land area-based subsidy, equipment purchase subsidy. And you know what I noticed? In about the last 20 years, we haven't gotten anywhere. Unfortunately, my parents aren't as entrepreneurial as I am. They prefer stability. But if we received so much money, we should be able to show something, right? Well, unfortunately not. How does a farmer get new land? Either inherits, buys, or rents it from older farmers who no longer have the energy to cultivate the land, or from those who move to cities. As soon as area-based subsidies were introduced, rental prices skyrocketed and owners no longer wanted to sell the land, even though the subsidy stipulates that the farmer who cultivates the land receives it and it's non-transferable. Despite this, the price of every land went up. Why? Because the farmer has money, they can pay the increased prices. The same was true with the fuel subsidy. I don't want to go into oil world market fluctuations now, but despite subsidies on fuel used in agriculture, filling a tractor is becoming more expensive day by day, and more money doesn't help with this. The farmer has money, they can pay it. Of course, we can fight increased prices if we buy better equipment, better seeds, and fertilizer. Someone has to pay for their development, of course, as it requires quite a bit of research to adapt to current changing weather and increased population needs. But I remember as a child, my father could choose whether to buy a car or a tractor. Fortunately, he chose the tractor. At that time, we could repair those types ourselves. Now, it's illegal even to open the hood, and if we try to buy a diagnostic device, it's restricted. The prices of machines and seeds are sky high, and what's the way out? The farmer has money, they receive equipment purchase subsidies. And here's what the data shows. Despite massive subsidies, EU food prices increased by 6.8% year-on-year in March 2024, with some items seeing much higher increases. Italian olive oil up 45%, Dutch butter up 32%, German bread up 12%. The average agricultural subsidy rate is 33% of production value, but this hasn't translated to lower consumer prices. Instead, what we've seen is that subsidies increase farmers' ability to pay, which then allows suppliers to raise prices. The farmer has money, so they can pay higher prices for land, fuel, equipment, seeds, fertilizer, and those costs eventually get passed on to consumers. And I think this is the real problem with UBI. As soon as we start actually receiving it universally, the farmer will have money. Here I mean we, the people, so we'll surely be able to pay the increased prices. So we'll be back where the cliff breaks. Food prices won't be more expensive because demand increases, because they won't, rather because more can be charged. Energy prices won't be more expensive, because we'll consume more and production can't keep up, but because there's a subsidy for it anyway. Consumers don't notice the increased costs. Let's ask for more. Uncle Sam will pay it. Why should drinking water be cheaper when we can bottle the same water and charge a premium price for it? This isn't theoretical. We've seen it happen with water privatization. Look at what happened in the UK when water was privatized in 1989 under Margaret Thatcher. Since then, UK water companies have accumulated £64 billion in debt while paying £72–85 billion in shareholder dividends. Average water bills rose from about £200 per year to £600–700 per year. In 2025, some regions saw increases of 19 to 47% in a single year. Thames Water specifically has £19 billion in accumulated debt, was fined £123 million for improper sewage discharge and has discharged over 300,000 hours of untreated sewage in a single year. At current rates, replacing aging pipes in the UK would take 700 years. The water sector is losing 20–25% of treated water to leaks. But the bills keep going up, and the dividends keep flowing to shareholders. Meanwhile, people are choosing between flushing toilets and buying food. And it's not just the UK. In Tianjin, China, after water services were taken over by French company Veolia, prices rose from 0.68 to 4.90 per ton between 1994–2010, a 7x increase. In Lanzhou, Veolia acquired the water system for 1.71 billion, 6x higher than competitor bids, and later demanded a 49% price increase. In 2014, a benzene contamination scandal hit Lanzhou with benzene levels 10x over safe limits, causing a citywide water shutdown. This is what happens when essential services are run for profit instead of public good. And this is exactly what would happen with UBI. So I think you can see now, there will be inflation. But not for the reason everyone says. Demand increases, so prices will rise, productivity will decrease, but demands will increase. No, that's nonsense. Prices will rise because capitalists will know that consumers have money and are willing to pay more for things necessary for basic living. Because after all, whoever lives, why wouldn't they want to live one more day? The problem isn't that UBI would cause inflation through increased demand. The problem is that UBI would give capitalists more information about who has money to spend, and they would adjust their pricing accordingly. Just like agricultural subsidies led to higher land prices and equipment costs, UBI would lead to higher costs for basic necessities, not because they cost more to produce, but because people can afford to pay more. So how can we climb out of this vicious cycle? I think the solution is simple, but big companies surely won't like it and will surely lobby against it, or already have. The most essential necessary things must be free. Instead of UBI, I would be happier if the government spent on ensuring everyone has adequate quantity and quality drinking water. If in winter we didn't have to calculate whether to turn on heating or electricity, if to do my work I didn't have to think about which internet service provider has cheaper service, or whether to buy a laptop or mobile phone, but could access our digital common knowledge base freely and unlimitedly. These services should never have been privatized. The idea that entrepreneurs and companies will be able to operate infrastructures more efficiently and economically is false. That better service providers will appear thanks to market competition and compete for consumers has already been proven wrong. When could you choose a different water service provider? Even if you could, the water will come from the same channel as before. And did the water quality change over the years? For me, it did. I had to buy a separate water filter because otherwise, according to my partner, our drinking water is undrinkable. Yet prices continuously rise, citing increased costs. What costs? In the past 30 years, they haven't laid new pipes. This is a monopoly situation where we have no choice, only to accept that we have to live and therefore have to pay. And we do pay. And as much as they're not ashamed to ask from us, let's be clear about what I'm proposing. I'm not saying nobody should ever pay for anything. I'm saying that the basic necessities of life, water, electricity, heating, internet access, healthcare, education, should be guaranteed as fundamental rights, not commodities to be bought and sold. These things should be publicly owned and operated, accountable to citizens rather than shareholders. Imagine what would be possible if these basic needs were guaranteed. No more choosing between heating and eating. No more skipping doctor visits because you can't afford the copay. No more children falling behind in school because their parents can't afford internet access for homework. No more families homeless because of medical bills. The technology and resources exist to provide these basic services to everyone. What we lack is the political will to challenge the profit motive that has turned basic human needs into investment opportunities. Think about it this way. In the mid-20th century, many countries built extensive public water systems, electrical grids, and telecommunications networks. They were considered public goods, essential for modern life. No one suggested that water companies should compete for customers, or that electricity should be a luxury product. These things were too important to leave to the market. Then came the neoliberal revolution of the 1980s, with its ideological crusade for privatization. We were told that private companies would be more efficient, that competition would drive down prices, that shareholders would demand better service. None of this has happened. Instead, we've seen skyrocketing prices, deteriorating infrastructure, massive dividends paid to shareholders while underinvestment continues, and executives awarded bonuses while services decline. The UK water companies have paid out £72.85 billion in dividends while accumulating £64 billion in debt and letting infrastructure crumble. This is not efficiency, this is extraction. This is not innovation, this is looting. And this is what would happen with UBI. The money wouldn't go to improving people's lives in a sustainable way. It would go to shareholders through higher prices for basic necessities. The landlords would raise rents. The utility companies would raise rates. The food companies would raise prices. And we'd be back where we started. Except now the government would be subsidizing corporate profits instead of meeting human needs directly. The solution isn't to give people money and hope the market treats them fairly. The solution is to ensure that the basic necessities of life are available to everyone as a right, not as a commodity to be bought and sold. This was prepared as a thought-provoking video. When I thought about this topic, it became increasingly clear that almost everything I need would be available for free, only profit makes it economically unjustified, and therefore I have to fight my depression and anxiety day by day, but at least I can now be calmly angry. I'm angry that we live in a world where we have the technology and resources to ensure everyone's basic needs are met, but we choose not to because it wouldn't be profitable. I'm angry that millions of people suffer preventable illnesses because healthcare is treated as a commodity. I'm angry that children go hungry while food rots in warehouses because it's not economically viable to distribute it. I'm angry that people die from exposure while homes sit empty because they're investments. But I'm also hopeful, because more and more people are waking up to this reality. More and more people are questioning why things have to be this way. More and more people are demanding change. So I want to leave you with some questions. What would you like to be free? What do you think it would take to make that happen? And even better, what would you do with your free time if you weren't constantly worrying about survival? Because here's what I've learned from my research into UBI experiments. When people's basic needs are met, they don't become lazy. They become creative. They start businesses. They care for their families. They participate in their communities. They create art and music and literature. They solve problems. They build the future. The problem isn't that people won't work if their needs are met. The problem is that we've created an economy that relies on desperation to function. We've created a system where people have to choose between dignity and survival. And that's not just morally wrong, it's economically inefficient. We're wasting human potential on a massive scale, and that should outrage all of us. It doesn't have to be this way. We can choose differently. We can build a society where everyone's basic needs are guaranteed, where people are free to pursue their passions and contribute to their communities, where the economy serves human needs rather than the other way around. The question is, do we have the courage to demand it?